If you've seen my first movie review on this channel, then this video may be a bit redundant. I apologize for that. It's been a few years since I did those videos, so I don't remember exactly what I said, and it's rough for me to watch my own videos, especially my early stuff. But I wanted to talk about this movie in a different way than before, and talk about things that I know I didn't bring up before. Man of Steel is perhaps the most divisive movie ever. The Rotten Tomatoes score shows how pretty much half the people like this movie and half dislike it. But it goes farther than that. So many of the people who like it love it. I frequently see people call it the best superhero movie ever, while many who dislike it seem to outright hate it. Really, it's the movie that best represents much of the internet. There really isn't a middle ground. Everything must be done in a hyperbole. Nothing can be mediocre. It must be either the best ever or it's the worst ever. But for me, this movie isn't the best ever or the worst ever. In fact, I enjoy the movie, and I would even go as far as to say it's my favorite Superman feature film. But I also feel that all Superman feature films so far have suffered from major flaws, and this one is no exception. When I hear complaints about this movie, I generally agree with them. I'll go over the major complaints and attempt to explain why I feel they are valid and why for me they don't kill the movie, but they definitely weaken it. It's worth pointing out that Man of Steel, from its very design, was going to have detractors. Warner Brothers clearly envisioned a Dark Knight treatment for Superman when they put Christopher Nolan in charge of the project. A dark, gritty Superman is counterintuitive to the character, so I'm honestly impressed with how well they pulled it off. But there will be people who dislike this movie simply because it's not their Superman. And this is honestly a valid complaint that shouldn't be dismissed casually. Many people have been huge fans of this character for decades, and have been waiting for a great movie to fully represent the character. And if you're not a huge fan of the first two Christopher Reeve movies, then you're still waiting to see your Superman on the big screen.
Bad vibrations?
So if you dislike the movie for that reason, I completely see where you're coming from. I didn't enter the movie with any expectations, and I enjoyed it. But I would agree, this is not a traditional Superman by any sense of the word. It is valid to say, why reinvent Superman when you can just make a new character? Personally, I'm fine with the changes they made, but I do feel for the people who say it's not their Superman, because it's a completely valid complaint. Now let's look at actual elements of the movie. First, the mishandling of Jonathan Kent. And I'm not talking about the casting of Kevin Costner, although his performance was less than thrilling.
You are my son.
But rather how he raises Clark. A huge dispute on the internet broke out over this scene.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
That was featured in the trailer. And let's face it, this is a really bad line. You could argue that he's just concerned for his alien son and doesn't want the government to get their hands on him. And there is reasoning behind it, but think about what he's telling Clark. He just found out that his son saved the lives of everyone on his school bus. And does he express pride in his son for this heroic deed? No. Instead, he postulates that perhaps his son should have let every person on the bus die. That's seriously fucked up. Maybe you could say that the line was said by a father who had yet to fully process events, and that makes the movie more real? Well, alright, then I have to ask, how does this line impact the story as a whole? Well, it doesn't. Which means even if the line is a real moment, in the end, it's just lazy writing. But we move on to Jonathan Kent's death. This is actually very well done, yet also very mishandled by the movie. Essentially, they're Uncle Benning Jonathan Kent. To Uncle Ben a character is to kill them off in order to galvanize protagonists into action. Uncle Ben isn't the first time this story tool has been used, but he is likely the most famous. It's especially used in comic books. Jonathan Kent's death should be the moment when Superman could have saved a person, but didn't for whatever reason. And because of that mistake, he took on the mantle of being a hero to ensure that he would never let someone he could save die again. But what this movie does is have Clark go into hiding for about a decade. Granted, he does at least save the work workers at the oil rig and Lois Lane during this period, but he is very much just in hiding looking for his roots. He has no intention of being a hero. He's just doing some soul searching, which makes sense for an alien refugee alone on a planet. Essentially, Clark does what he likely would have done when his father was still alive, meaning his father's death didn't have a direct impact on how he lived his life, meaning killing him off is nothing more than lazy writing. When Superman was written, he was meant to be a modern-day Moses, more or less. But Man of Steel tinkered with this and turned him into a modern-day Jesus, which is perfectly fine. Hell, Man of Steel didn't even originate this idea. Smallville was all about making Superman Jesus. I literally have no problems with this idea. Hell, it can give film students something to write papers on. But because of how they handled it, that student would likely receive a grade of... They made it too obvious. He is born and we skip his life until he's about 30. Then he's asked to sacrifice himself.
Always look on the bright side of life.
Plenty of Jesus there already. But it works because it's the story they're telling. The elements are just there to make Superman Jesus, but they're also just parts of the story. Where this idea really goes off the rails is the scene in the church, showing us Jesus over Superman's shoulder. Doesn't serve the story in any way. All it is the script shouting at the top of its lungs, "Get it? He's Jesus!" Then when he flies out the Kryptonian ship to save Lois, he flies out like he's crucified. It again feels like the script shouting, "Hey, you get it yet?" And when a script is going out of its way to show you how clever it's being, it stops being clever and starts being obnoxious. Pretty much the whole third act or so is kind of just destruction porn, but I do enjoy it. This type of epic level disaster has become fairly common fare for superhero movies. The Avengers did it, and now Man of Steel is doing it. And to be perfectly honest, if a bunch of incredibly powerful Kryptonians decide to throw down on Earth, I imagine the destruction in their wake would be massive. It's also worth noting that this is an untrained Superman in his first fight. He purposely avoided conflict in order not to hurt people, but now he has to fight Zod and his army to save Earth. I'm completely fine with this Superman making mistakes during this fight and being sloppy and even directly causing collateral damage. All that is fine for me. The biggest issue I have is that Superman doesn't really seem to care about the civilians in this conflict. If you recall, Captain America's job in the Battle of New York was largely to protect civilians.
Captain, the bank on 42nd past Madison. They cornered a lot of civilians in there.
The other Avengers were also working in an attempt to contain the damage and limit the civilian casualties.
Loki's gonna keep this fight focused on us, and that's what we need. Without him, these things could run wild.
Limit being the key word. The Avengers cannot save everyone when a huge disaster like this happens. Just like an untrained Superman cannot be expected to save everyone. But what he needs to do is care. He saves a helicopter pilot, he saves Lois Lane, and he tells people to go into buildings that Kryptonians tear through like paper.
Get inside. It's not safe.
Wouldn't it be better to tell people to get away as fast as possible? I feel like in many ways, Age of Ultron was trying to respond to Man of Steel, with constantly showing the heroes trying to save people.
Stark finds a way to blow this rock.
Not till everyone's safe.
Everyone up here versus everyone down there, there's no math there.
I'm not leaving this rock with one civilian on it.
I didn't say we should leave.
Hell, get a load of this one bit right before Iron Man slams Hulk into this building.
How quickly can we buy this building?
He is going out of his way to minimize civilian casualties. Superman and Man of Steel causes a fair amount of damage that could kill people, which is an issue. I certainly wouldn't expect him to save everybody in such an event, but he should show concern and caution in this battle. Perhaps even have him screw up a few times and have him quickly save people that he put in danger, showing the audience that he's learning and that he is still new at this superhero thing. And another problem with the destruction is how Superman and Lois make out in the middle of it, essentially telling the audience, wasn't all this death cool? Think about all the people that must have died here recently. Think about all the people that Superman probably killed just because he's inexperienced at fighting. And I'm not saying it's his fault that those people died. He's inexperienced at this, and he was just doing the best he could. But don't you think perhaps his time at this moment would be better spent using his speed and his X-ray vision to get people out of rubble? How many people are dying in the rubble right now because he's not saving them during this quiet moment? It's all types of fucked up. It's not helped by one of the dumbest lines in the movie.
You know they say it's all downhill after the first kiss.
I'm pretty sure that only counts when you're kissing a human.
I think this is a bold decision. They put Superman in a situation where he needed to kill Zod. Zod is becoming more and more accustomed to his powers, and Superman has no way to restrain him indefinitely, and humanity definitely doesn't have a prison that can hold him. Zod has military training, and this is Superman's first fight. If the fight continues for much longer, Zod will be able to continue his killing spree, and Superman will have no way to stop him. In fact, there's a good chance Zod would kill him.
There's only one way this ends, Cal. Either you die, or I do.
Zod will not stop until Superman kills him. In fact, that appears to be his whole goal. Kryptonite isn't a thing in this universe yet, so depowering him isn't an option. Superman is forced to kill him, but they never discuss Superman's opinion of killing in this movie. I would assume he views it as bad, but there really isn't a discussion of morality in this movie besides Jonathan telling his son letting school children die may be okay.
Maybe.
Sure, he yells after he snaps his neck. But without context, we don't know what that yell really means. Traditional Superman would surely avoid killing at all costs, but the comic book has had time to establish that. Superman and Man of Steel is a reinvention of the character. The audience has no idea where he stands on killing. Batman is usually a character that doesn't kill.
Understand? You have all these rules, and you think they'll save you.
I have one rule.
But Tim Burton's Batman killed rather casually. How do we know this iteration of Superman doesn't kill casually as well? Perhaps there's a bunch of bodies in his backyard and he only yelled because Zod is the last of his people. We need context. It's great to put a hero in an impossible situation where they have to break their own rules for the greater good. But if those rules aren't established, then breaking them means nothing to the audience. There are other problems that weigh down this movie, but the film also has a lot of strengths. The first half of the movie didn't know what to do with Lois Lane. Rather than have characters talk about what a great reporter she is and having her win awards for reporting because Superman had a crush on her, here we see that she's a good reporter. In fact, such a good reporter, she finds out about his existence before anyone else on the planet is aware of alien life.
I'm from the Daily Planet, and I'd like to talk to you about your son.
And even though the color palette is incredibly dull, there are still some beautiful visuals here. By far my favorite is Jor-El telling Superman the story of Krypton, though I do have to ask why they have a 20-minute scene on Krypton at the beginning if we're just gonna learn everything here. And also, I don't envy any musical composer that has to follow John Williams, but Hans Zimmer really proved up to the task. I also like how the idea of alien life is handled in this movie. It honestly feels like the most realistic way you could handle the Superman story. Granted, it is about a guy in a cape flying around in a colorful outfit, but still, they did their best to try to ground it, and for the most part succeeded. I like this movie, but at the same time, I see glaring problems with it. It's weird, because even though it's good, I find myself agreeing with the haters of the movie more than the fans. This movie has huge problems with it. If I had to sum up all the problems with this movie in one sentence, it would be great ideas with lazy execution. Because there are some good ideas in this, but they are handled so ham-fistedly that it stops being a good idea and starts being obnoxious. For what it is, I do enjoy this movie, and at least it's a Superman movie where he doesn't solve the problem by reversing time or using an amnesia kiss or some bullshit like that. I give this movie a 7 out of 10.
Hey, if you like this video, please make sure to hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe. That helps me out a lot. And if you really love this video, consider visiting my Patreon page.